morning.
Morning.
And I see we do have a couple residents on board with us this morning. We have one resident on board with us this morning. Thank you. Good morning, Eileen. I would like to call this meeting to order, Board of Directors meeting. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll make the motion to adopt, but I do have a question.
A motion to adopt? Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Jackson, can you speak into your microphone clearer, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I thought there was some other piece of business that we were supposed to do this morning, but I can't remember now what it was, but there was something we were going to add to this agenda. Does anybody else remember, or am I just?
To me, it was all about budget, but there were two parts of the budget. One is clarifying what
Yeah.
a lot of the loose ends from last week, and the main thing was the service area.
I was just thinking there was some piece of business we had to
Talking
get
about
done.
maybe supplements or something.
Was there something that you wanted us to approve today?
We had talked about adding it to the 22nd, and then it's been moved to October. But I think
Okay.
you're talking about supplements.
And they're
Oh,
not,
for the Island Village.
and they're not thrilled about that, but I think that's really the only
Okay,
place
I'm
we have
sorry,
for
I
it
just-
on the agenda. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
No, I'd rather
There's
have
too
you
many
ask now than,
Moving need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So
Okay.
that was my motion. to
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you. Discussion item, discuss the service area budgets. Cindy?
Yay!
I know you've sent us documentation, so I'm going to pull that up.
I have had Susanna and I have had so much fun the last couple of
Oh, it
weeks.
sounds like.
Yeah.
So you have several exhibits.
Can you put it on the screen?
Yeah, Patrick, would you?
Oh, thank you.
It's
So-
hard to see it because
That's
it's all,
Jackson, that's the president.
That's the one.
You're looking at your sheet like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
I have to put my glasses on.
Cindy, how much of the updated version is different from what you handed out last week? I know we have an electronic.
A little bit.
Just a little, okay.
Well, yeah, we added,
got it.
at Brian's suggestion, I added a line for accounts receivable because Susanna and I have been discussing whether or not we need to put a reserve for bad debt on that line item. So that's up for discussion. I added the 2021 assessments, a line for that. And then also percentage of increase or decrease to the proposed budget for 2022.
Okay.
So what page do you want us to be on?
You can be on this page.
Well, you're not digital.
I pulled up the one that you sent to us yesterday, Cindy. Is that the most
Yeah,
updated
there's
copy?
one, you got the one with tabs at the.
Yes, the one on the screen.
Are you looking at the
Public-
Excel screen?
Publicized version.
Okay. There was one that was attached to a packet that came from Susanna and one from Cindy, and I think they're both the same
That
document.
was the one that was too large.
That's not what's on the screen, just
No,
to be
correct.
clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually think if this is what I think it is, then I think you can work off of what's on the screen.
Okay.
Because this is your most current, right, Cindy?
Yeah, but it's different than what was in the board packet last night, because I added some additional information to the board, just to make it easier for them to do calculations.
But it's the same information, just a different format.
Well, there's additional information that the board got.
A few extra rows.
yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah,
And this,
remember?
the
we-
one I'm looking at has the account receivable one. Is that the one that would tell me that's the most? current?
Yeah, but then remember, Brian, we talked just to take the water line out because there was so many discrepancies.
Yeah, we could talk. Okay.
You
This
talk
just-
through
this
it?
just has extra row. Ours, the one that was too big to send, the one that was you sent had that many extra rows.
Okay, do me a favor, work off the one on the screen and then you can talk off the other stuff because I only have one computer.
Got it,
Okay.
got it.
All right.
Okay,
Go ahead, Cindy.
Wait a minute.
And just, yes,
Because I don't
just so
think I
you
brought
know,
along the one that's on the
Celia's out of
screen.
town and.
I don't think I brought the one that's on the screen and I can't see the screen, but anyway, it's basically the same. So we went through line by line, we being Susanna and Tim and I, a couple weeks ago, and kind of tweaked the numbers that you originally had on this page in your packet for the board. We found a few things that were very out of whack. One of them was, what was it? I think it was general maintenance. for Academy Row was very high, and so we brought that down. We found some other items that, you know,
Can you give me a 30,000-foot view of this? Because I really, I appreciate that there's a lot of detail here, but
okay,
I'm trying to wrap my head around this stuff.
okay,
So
I think
can-
I need a bigger.
Yeah.
okay. You see, over here, you see the percentages of increases. Keep in mind that does not include water. The reason that there's blank lines, in looking at these budget, when we started doing the budget, it was obvious that there was something wrong with the line item that tracks reclaimed water. So I started digging into those numbers, and the more I dug, the more I found. So right now, we're still waiting for some answers from the water company. And the reason that there's nobody, because it only affects, right now, there's 1, 2, 3 that are still pending answers from the water company. But the reason nobody else is filled in is because each month we get reports from the water company that tells us how many units of water each service area and each facility and each park
Mhm,
uses in the course of the month.
mhm.
And then from there, the charges that everybody's charged is a percentage of total.
Okay, so I get that there's a water problem.
Yeah.
Could we focus on the percentage of increase or decrease
So
as a whole? Because when I look at that, what I see is everything from a
negative.
negative 1% to a 28% increase. And a negative 18% increase. Can you just talk about those in that line? I'd like to get a
Okay.
feeling for why we've got such a wide disparity.
Okay, so you're on the bottom.
Oh, I'm at the top where it says
At the
percentage
top.
of increase, decrease.
Well,
Right.
what-
You're
what-
saying something that's not on the screen is what you're telling me.
right,
True that.
sorry.
Well,
Okay,
So maybe I could start off and
You
help a little
want me to
bit.
Hold this up for Brian so he can see it.
that's actually
That
not
will
a bad
help.
idea.
You know.
Brian, can you see that percentage?
Or can you-
No.
Brian, I'm so sorry, I thought you had
yeah,
your
you should
device
have-
with you.
If I could just start off and help maybe provide some general information, I think that will
That
get
would be
great.
everybody
Please do.
on the track of what we're talking about. So the service areas are set up to where we list what they spend every year. And so we're talking administrative fee, which is the admin fee is what each owner is charged per door. Then you have legal and professional, if there's any kind of budget line item for legal help. There's miscellaneous administrative, which is postage usually where we're sending out notices to the homeowners for projects coming up and the budget. Then you have general maintenance, which includes fence repairs. If there's going to be, what are some other general, a lot of fence repairs, maybe some of the gutters repairs too. That falls in general. You've got power washing and gutter cleaning that gets done twice a year. And landscape management is the contract for the landscapers to maintain the townhomes. Landscape and irrigation is land irrigation repairs and operating plant replacement. Now that's just usually smaller because that's a few plants that we account for every year, but of course they have their reserves as well. The exception to that is Spring Lake Gardens, who does not have a reserve. So all their plant replacement is included in their operating costs. The next line is for termite bond because that's included as a requirement in the supplemental. There are roof repairs, and then there's water and electricity. Looking at the roof repairs, you'll see that there's not a lot scheduled for 2022. And the reason being is that we're at the mark where all the roofs are getting replaced. So I think we've had probably 5, 6 service areas that have already had their roofs replaced in the last year or two.
Mhm.
Academy Row had theirs about 5 years, so their warranty's up. So that's why we counted some for there. And then the other ones are due in the next year or so. So you don't
And that comes
really.
out of replacement reserve?
Yes,
So that's why it's not showing on this sheet.
Right.
Is that
yes.
correct?
As-
Parkview has another half of theirs to be done,
Right.
doesn't show up. What about the roofs that we're repairing based on the litigation?
Those come out of reserves.
Those come out of reserves.
Yes, that's always been out of reserves.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is just the operating budget. Am I
That
correct?
is correct. This is the operating budget.
Yes, and
So
so
now-
you'll see a line up there for less reserve fund at the top.
Okay.
And that is how much the reserve schedule is allocating to be taken out of the reserves and put in, out of operating to put into reserves to account for big projects like
You're saving up
Yes,
for the big.
that's
your
project.
savings account. That's what everybody's
So
savings
tell me
account
again
is.
what that line was. What's the title?
That's less reserve fund up there in blue.
Yeah,
The
one
blue?
26 for the first, 126.5.
So you actually back in to the total assessments
Okay. I got
that people need. Okay.
I got that.
So at the bottom, what Cindy was talking about was water and electricity. And so when you have a townhome structure, you have 4, 5, 6 units that share the meter. And so they have to divvy up that water. When you have service areas that are duplexes, triplexes like Golden Astor, Roseville, East Village, they have individual meters on their homes. So they don't have to share the cost because it gets billed directly. And so that's why you won't see a line item for Golden Astor, East Village, Roseville Corner. Now,
For
the mis-
electricity.
and water, because that's
And
all
water.
about the irrigation. It's how much water they're using for irrigation and how much electricity does it cost to use the irrigation controllers.
So
that
the
again.
water and the electricity are for the outside areas.
Right.
Separately metered are individual unit use.
Yes, if it's a duplex or a
And that's
triplex.
where, yeah,
Right.
thank you.
Does that also include like electricity out in the passive park that's in the middle of?
Well, a passive park would be charged to CROA.
Okay. So
As
that's
part of
not
those
included, even
bills.
though that's as part of this
So it's
service
their
area.
immediate,
It's what's in your
Surroundings.
front yard, what's in your backyard, what's
Mm-hmm.
used there. So in general, you'll see if you have a water allocation, you'll have electric allocation. The only one that's a bit of a mystery we found is Charleston Place. And my theory on that, and I don't know if it's accurate, is because we just found out that some of those Charleston properties are actually allocated to the owner. And so we're
Some
trying
with
to.
the CDD. and-
Yeah, but so much CDD, so we're trying to figure that out. And then Cindy did a great investigative journey with the irrigation out at Parkview and just found that there were some discrepancies from the water company. And then so we've been kind of looking into that.
So that shows as a credit, that big number?
No.
That's-
That's what, based on history, that's what they would have paid.
So we're still ironing out the water issue,
Yeah,
but that
there's
kind of.
three that we
So-
still have to figure out.
That kind of describes kind of what these line items are for. And so everything that's on here is what the service area owners are putting into the operating funds to pay for. And then the admin fee, of course, is the service area manager and the service area coordinator. And then the less bad debt in the past has been allocated because you have situations where sometimes, the owners are behind on their assessments or they don't pay, we're in tough times right now to speak of. And so you'll find a situation where a service area doesn't have the money to pay for some of the bills because the operating cash hasn't caught up yet.
Okay,
So- Yeah,
can I jump in? So let's,
Yes.
let's focus only right now, Jackson, on the expenses. So the admin fee through the electricity. And I talked with Cindy yesterday, so I thought Susanna did a very good job there, but let me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but based upon my conversation, power washing, gutter cleaning, landscape management, and termite bond are contractual, and we know those expenses are right.
they're fixed. Yes.
That's right. So
That's
there's
right.
nothing for us to even argue about. Admin fee at 167.7 is the big nut. And I sent the whole board and Susanna yesterday an exhibit in response to Kevin's question that I think proves that at $300, which is an increase from $240, that we have a good coverage on the total expense that's going to happen there. And the increase is really due to inflation and stuff going on. I thought that was pretty fair, but we can comment on that. Miscellaneous, administrative, and general maintenance really are immaterial amounts. I talked about them a little with Cindy, who had talked with Susanna, but I mean, those aren't moving the needle. Roof repair is one item, electricity and water. There was just a coding allocation issue and some problems there, which will get sorted out. My recommendation for this group to seriously consider would be, let's get water correct at June 30 and take whatever the water bill was at June 30 times 2, and that becomes the 2022 budget. I think, Jackson, that would be an approach that would get you a fair expense budget.
Yeah, I'm okay with the expenses. Let me focus on one particular service area that's causing me problems, and then maybe we can clear this up for me.
Okay.
Parkview is showing on the latest report a 28% increase in their assessment. Cindy tells me that Parkview only pays their assessments quarterly. Is that accurate?
Yes.
They're the only service area that does that, because
Yes.
of course it's Artisan. Does that mean the 28% needs to be divided by 4 to tell me what the real increase is? I mean, it's your spreadsheet. Something's
It's-
wrong. I'm just trying
That's
to
an
get
annual,
at.
Well-
that's mine. Well,
No, it's not annual. You are correct. If you multiply that by 4, that's what their annual assessment would be per household.
so we haven't put these in as monthly. We put them in as quarterly because that's how they're billed.
But if we put it in monthly.
Just Parkview.
It'll still be the same percentage. I don't see the percentage, but
Yeah, that's.
whether
what-
it's annual,
Says
quarterly, or monthly, the
28%.
percentage increase is going to be the same.
It
Yeah.
says 28%, Brian. That can't be right.
So what's their
Well, the-
old,
Well, I don't
Part
know
of the
what supports
reason-
the 28%. That's what
Part-
I'm,
what's their old assessment amount and what's the proposed new assessment? Let's go. there.
It says 2021 was 204
is the old.
and the new is 263. But let me just clarify, I know what Cindy's probably trying to get out is that part of the reason Parkview's assessments have gone up so much is because the water bill is extremely high. Am I correct, Cindy?
Yeah, but even if you cut that back, it's still a 16% increase. There's not another service area that's even close to that amount. Everybody else is 1, 2, 3, 8, as much as 10%, and then suddenly Parkview's at 16% even after the water is taken out.
They're also putting $140,000 into reserves.
Yeah, they have.
well, I
a
was going to say,
big-
the question in my mind would be, is what was their landscape management last year compared to the 51,399? And what was their reserve fund last year?
It jumped up significantly this year, but
Which one?
With the
Parkview's did,
reserve or
the
landscape?
reserves.
Why did it go up so high?
I can go get
Wait,
the,
I have it.
Wait a
go
second.
get the
that's-
book.
I have it.
Okay, but I can tell you that at some point, we met with Parkview a few years ago, and the assessments were going to go up crazy high with the new reserve study. And so when we met with the Parkview committee, the idea was to somehow level out the assessments a little bit more, because there was such a spike that their assessments were going up so high that we leveled out the reserve funding. And so it kind of stayed consistent for a couple of years. And then this was the year it kind of, I think it jumped up. How much is it, Cindy? 20,000,
It's
30,000?
huge. It's a huge jump.
Yeah.
Well,
In
actually,
2022, it should be 195. What's on the sheet?
140.
140. That's what's on the reserve, on the reserve study that I have. That I got from Susanna,
And what was it last year, Cindy?
106,660,
Yeah, so it went up
$34,000.
30, yeah.
$30,000. But what's that number you
So
just
that's
quoted, Brian?
gutters
That's a
and
much
downs-
bigger number.
So that's that number. They have in the line for 2022, gutters and downspouts, landscape improvements, roofs, asphalt shingles, project management, and roofs, asphalt shingles replacements again.
Aren't we doing? isn't that
Okay,
one
so I
line under
have, it is now coming back to me. The prior funding plan.
we had to make
Yeah,
changes to
so
the
what
original
had
one.
Happened here is they had done a thing because it was going high and then it was going low.
Right,
They had come back and they had said 120,000 in 2020, and then they went to 130, and then 140, 140, 140, 140, 140, 140, 140. So it was locked in at 140 a year.
Well,
Yeah.
That's not what this says, not that I'm disagreeing with you, but that's not the information that we had, but we can certainly change.
Well, you won't have this information because I just, until
Made it up.
Susanna said that, I didn't really realize that I'm looking at the plan they had put together, so the 140 ties exactly. And that should tie to, and last year they should have had, well, for 2021, they should have had 130.
I'm still struggling with how, if you only raise the reserve by
10,000.
$10,000, your assessment goes up 28%.
so there's 59 people in
There's
Parkview.
47.
47 divided by 47 equals divided
Okay,
by 12. So
um,
that's $17 a person a month. just for
then-
the reserves.
But then Jackson, look at the
I'm
Look
looking
at the power washing, that's 10,000 compared to the others.
Do they
Look
have
at
that
the-
much more concrete that needs?
Look at the
pressure
landscape
wash?
management.
That's your big increase.
And then
That's a big
the
amount.
water.
And then the water.
So it's $17 more per person just for the reserves.
Yeah, I got that.
And then there's another. What's the,
So Susanna, so why is the landscape management so high?
well, they went up 3% from last year.
But I mean,
And
just,
that's across the
they
board.
don't have. Well, I guess they probably have more land
There's
attached
a
to
lot.
them than they
There's a
do
lot.
at
There's a lot
Spring
of-
Lake.
There's
Yeah,
a
it
lot
goes-
of,
It goes around over, I mean, it's a big,
so it's been the same for 3 years plus the one rollover. But this last year, all the landscape companies asked for a 3% increase due to the labor.
Yeah, and
That's
so if you look
expected.
at what their
What did you just send, Brian?
landscape management.
That's the reserving plan for Parkview, just so y'all have it.
Okay.
If you look at the landscape management for Parkview and compare it to Spring Lake, Parkview has 47 townhomes, Spring Lake has 109. If you look at those two numbers, they're kind of in sync. It's like
I
almost
guess what I'm
double.
asking Cindy is this number right or wrong? Is it really a 28% increase? Or
According to
are
those
we
numbers,
making a
it is.
mathematical error somewhere? And it shouldn't, I mean, if, this is really nuts that we're doing this quarterly. Can we translate it to a monthly amount?
So it doesn't look so high.
Yeah, but if you translate it to,
I don't think-
I mean,
But
the
the
percentage
percentage
won't
shouldn't
change.
Yeah.
I would
percentage
think
is
they
still-
would. So something is, I don't, I just know I'm gonna show up for dinner at the club. And I'm gonna have somebody walk up to me from Parkview and say, why did you raise our assessments 28%? And I'm gonna have to shrug my shoulders because even after this conversation.
All right,
I'm-
let's do the following. Susanna or Cindy, send us Parkview item by item for 2020, 2021, and 2022, so that we can all look at that.
Yeah, if
And
I,
That's fair.
that
Thank
would
you.
help me understand it. So if I
Okay.
could see where the big changes are.
Thank you.
That's what's specific for quarter. So
And then
Mhm.
in the same vein, if you look at Academy
it's
Row,
that much per home.
we're looking at
Which is
a
okay.
decrease of
Per month.
18% before the water changes and 21% after the water changes.
Yeah.
So I have the same set of questions. Why such a big drop in the expense line to cause an 18% drop in an assessment?
They
When
had
everyone else is going up, why is that one going down?
They had a
double digits?
$40,000 an extra $40,000 in their budget last year. Or, hold please. Landscape management.
So we took that out for this year?
Well, they had $40,000 in landscape management last year in their budget. I
Budget.
don't know why. But we looked at the history, what they've spent so far this year, and adjusted it down to more than, I'm looking at this sheet here that you guys.
Okay.
We adjusted the irrigation. We didn't adjust the management because that's the contract.
Yeah.
So that
Well,
went
but
up
I'm- but I'm
3%.
saying,
But every other service area is paying, other than Spring Lake, which is kind of different.
Right.
Every other service area is paying at least $300 a month per unit for their assessment. Then Academy Row suddenly is at 267. That doesn't make sense to me at a high level,
Well, and for
That could be-
59 units.
right? But even spread out over 59 units, why is, I mean,
Their landscape management's only $2,200.
yeah,
I have that too.
I just
Is
think
that
that
accurate?
number's wrong. Okay.
Wait,
Is
hold
it
on, I
accurate?
have
You
the,
thi- Is it, you think it's accurate?
Well,
Can you do the
That's
same
really
kind of
low
analysis
at-
on
I
Academy
can,
Row?
yeah, and I can
Hang on.
explain more.
That's low landscape.
If I can make a suggestion, when we do the CROA budget, we have prior year compared to current budget. What we
Right.
need to do here is, and it would be very easy in Excel, is to just have this budget for any changes below it in an Excel spreadsheet, prior year budget, and then a difference that jumps out. So it'll answer all these questions.
Would help me.
So, yeah,
That
so,
would-
so I think having two prior years would be helpful rather than a
Yeah.
single, because one year could be an off year for a particular service area.
Right. I'm just really trying to look, Ryan, I'm just looking at it's an exception report. I'm just trying to see why we've got some of these weird anomalies, because most of the service areas fall in the same range and they're tracking about the same way.
Right.
So unless I can identify something at Parkview to the negative and Academy Row to the positive, I think something's wrong with our numbers.
Okay.
So another comment going back, if I may, to Parkview. At a high level, yes, we're talking about a big increase percentage, but is it really that much? So if my math is correct, and you all can verify this, you take that quarter amount, multiply by 4, and you get the annual amount.
Right.
Okay? Divide by 12, you get a monthly amount. If you divide that monthly amount, which is 87,711 by 47 units, that's 1866 per year per home, or 155 a month. 155 a month per unit seems okay. It's the percentage. It seems reasonable to me, but that's at a high level.
It's reasonable as long as how it compares to last year.
And so we want to look at how that compares to last year per unit. And are our numbers correct, or are we correcting a miscalculation from the past? We don't.
Mhm.
That's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay, I can answer that question
Great,
right now. That's a
great.
mistake. The $2,200, I apologize.
On the landscaping
Mhm.
for Academy Row.
Yep, because we've paid through June 20,309.
Yeah. I was
So
just
that-
So that's
asking
a 6
Suzanne,
month.
is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
22 a month and we accidentally put in a month instead of the year? That
So
was my
what-
question.
And
So that's a big
honestly,
difference.
I believe when it comes to landscape management, we should use the contract amount, because if you go with what we've just paid by June, there could be a payment that's
right.
lagging, there could be one that's not, VMS could have.
Right, so that
That's why
needs, but
Academy
it'll,
Row at
it'll be
2,200
at
makes
least
no
double that
sense.
plus the 3% or
Does
whatever.
that, so that'll solve that negative
So
amount.
the printout from last week was 48 for that one,
Well-
for that line.
So
item.
those two service areas, I think, need
Yep.
a deeper dive.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
We will.
If, unless we have anything else about those, I have another broad level question. Is Kevin still on?
His thing's up.
Kevin, you there?
I am, sorry, just hitting that mute button.
That's okay. I want to go to this line item. Are we okay to move on? Can we-
Yeah.
Administrative fee?
I want to talk about the
Yeah.
administrative fee. And the reason I wanted Kevin microphone open is I know that this has continued to be an issue, but I'm not sure I can articulate it very well. Are you willing to talk a little bit about this?
So overall, and I'll make it a higher level. Essentially, as I learned the first time I came on the board, these service areas were very, the numbers were too connected throughout the CROA budget and the service area. I look at service areas as if they are the same as a condo association. In theory, they are. They just are closely connected to CROA. I believe that over the years, they have been connected because it's easy to do so and say, hey, management person A is able to go ahead, they're working for CROA. We're going to have them go ahead and do a little help over here, whether it's the maintenance team, whether it's the management of the service area manager, whatever it may be. And those have, I believe, in my opinion, have really gotten carried away a little bit, and we need to find a clear line to cut them. There is the advantages of a service area being connected to CROA for things such as a discounted fee on legal, a improved level of service because of the connection with CROA. But the actual figures, when 4 years ago, were being subsidized by the entire 4321 of CROA for each service area. Now, that doesn't mean each service area was benefiting more than it was, dishing out, but there were select service areas that the fees that they are paying towards management were nowhere near accurate. And overall, the association, the master association, so single family homes, or better yet, condo associations who are already paying an additional condo fee are subsidizing the expenses of operating service areas as well. Is
So-
that where
Right,
you're
right.
going with this?
Yeah, so my next question from that is, right now, we just charge a flat $300 for a service area administrative fee. Should we A, increase that amount if we're going to keep that structure, or B, should we be doing some kind of math and figuring out proportionally some of these other ancillary expenses? So
Did you
that-
look at the exhibit I sent out
So didn't
yesterday?
that, yeah,
'Cause I
didn't
did
that,
that.
yeah,
We already bumped it up from
It was-
20 to 25.
it was 240 last year and now it's
Yeah.
300 this year. Is that, are those the correct numbers, Brian?
Yeah.
Those were correct, and I sent an
Oh.
email with an Excel spreadsheet yesterday, or PDF, one or the other, showing the allocation of everything that I thought Kevin was talking about, including an allocation amount for postage and stuff like that.
Right, that's the headcount budget spreadsheet.
Yeah, for
Yes.
service that I called service areas.
Okay,
I think it's worth it to explain, on a homeowner point of view, why the number's going up. Because I remember just recently last year, we had some special meetings with certain service areas, and they felt like charging them the admin fee was unfair based on the service they get, depending on if they have roofing or just landscaping, et cetera. So I think it's worth it to spend a moment and just explain, where that number comes from.
sure, go ahead.
Not from me, from you.
Brian.
Well, Su-
All right, so.
Susanna, I mean, when it comes to that, really quick, I'll take a stab at it, and I'll go ahead and reference any smaller associations that we have in the community. I am most familiar with Town Center. That's not a secret. And we have a community manager that we need to go ahead and pay their salary. In the industry, there are two different types of community management. There's portfolio management, and then there's the management that most in Celebration are familiar with,
On-site.
such as your on-site. You have a specific community that you focus on, and that's it. Other types are portfolio managers, where these 3 or 4 communities share the salary of an individual. And some years, there is more time spent on one association. Maybe they're getting their roof redone than other years. But on average, it all evens out, and they have to pay for that person, that box, regardless of how much or how little they do, or the perception of what they're getting and gaining from that. It's just the way the system works. And that is not a Celebration thing. That is the state of Florida and HOAs in general. So the service areas I look at, and again, this is just me, I look at them that they need to be treated as if a portfolio manager and a portfolio style management for all service areas that just happen to be connected to CROA. Does that make sense in that way?
Yes. Well, and I want that to be to the benefit of the owners when they ask. And I think that was a really great explanation. Thank you.
And let me follow up on that. So Spring Lake was the one that raised the issue more than
Gardens.
anyone.
It was gardens.
Spring Lake.
Gardens.
Yeah,
Yes.
the garden homes.
Gardens, okay, whatever the spring, I'm looking at the spreadsheet on there, there's Spring Lake Townhomes and Spring Lake. Spring Lake said, we don't have as many rows as other places. We looked at it, the majority of management time, and we have 2 people dedicated to service areas, is spent in landscape management and landscape and irrigation. When you take something like power washing, that is outsourced, or gutter cleaning is outsourced. So that is a specific contract, and you've got those items in blue. If you take a termite bond is just a bill that comes in. It was processed in Arizona. I'm sure it'll be processed in Texas. It takes no time. So I was under the impression, adding to Kevin's comment, that really everybody should pay an equal amount, because really the work is in landscape management and in landscape inspections. We do not and did not have an ability to track phone calls and all that kind of stuff. Maybe in a grand manager's world, we might be able to do that much better, but some years somebody's going to be more, somebody's going to be less, depending on whether they're having a roof replaced or a big painting project and stuff like that. So you get into fairness questions, I think. And you look at the overall. So I just wanted to add that to what Kevin said.
Okay. Very good.
so
Kevin, did you get a chance to look at the spreadsheet that Brian sent
You want to
yesterday?
be on the kitchen, that's not a problem at all.
Yes, I'm actually staring at it right now once again.
yeah.
Do you,
And just for clarification, we're not going to put it up on the screen because it's got salary information in it. Okay. so
Correct.
that-
Do you have a problem with Brian's calculations as far as percentages and things?
I think it's
Overall, no. I think we're in the right direction. I don't know if this is essentially the final solution, but I think it's getting closer to fair than unfair for the entire community, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's a conceptual difference here. What Cindy and Brian did was to take the existing structure and allocate a percentage of things like staffing for executive director and so on, and just assigned an arbitrary number. I mean, I assume it's arbitrary, 5% of or 10%.
5%, yeah, so 10% of the community manager's time spent on service areas.
I did a time study yesterday between 10:29 and 10:30.
Okay.
So
And-
I do have a question real quick as you're just talking about those numbers, because somebody such as operations manager, I feel is much more than 5% dedicated towards service areas. So I need a better understanding for these numbers.
Okay, those numbers were purely Brian Kitzel wags. I mean, there's no
Okay.
other, the
Oh, you
200%
disclosed that ahead of time.
The rest of them were a pure judgment call. Every number on there, judgment based upon Brian just making guesses. And we really would have to have Susanna and Tim and a few people say, what is truth?
Yeah, so this is a starting point. And so it actually may be 3% or 7%, but it's what is your best estimate looking back over a couple of years for each of those 4 positions where it's a percentage of time.
That's
I
fine.
had no data at all. It was a pure guess.
But it's a good starting point.
So
We can
on-
provide percentages without knowing the salary, so that's
That's right.
fine.
So if we look at the 559 units,
Yeah.
right, excluding Artisan Park, and we divide that by the 4321.
Yeah.
That's basically 13%. Right? So that's 13% of the units are of the 4321. So if you look at the percentages of time, I think that's probably, operations, I kind of agree with you, Kevin. I think 5%, I think the operation manager probably spends more than 5% of their time on service areas. Financial, I don't know if he or she will spend 15% of their time on that
But
with the new accounting.
but they
So,
could-
I
yeah,
think
but
that's a fair estimate
That's a good
because
question.
You think?
there's
It is-
financials every month for service areas.
and
yeah.
it is
So
more
I think
heavily
Brian would
reported.
probably, and Cindy would have a
with
good
all of the different
calculation on
service
that.
areas.
Mhm.
Yeah. So do we agree to go with these percentages until we know better? Or till we have better numbers?
My suggestion, I would appreciate going forward this way, just as, let's go with the WAG. As long as we instruct management to actually do a better time tracking, perhaps for January through June or January through, May, something like that. So for next year's budget review, there's more accurate figures and percentages of time.
So I would think Ceranet will help us do that because that will track
Sure.
phone calls, which generate work, which generate, billing, I just think
Possibly. I think a lot of it, and it's hard to get a very accurate number. It's
Yeah.
based on, it's training, right? When you have new managers come in, and then, the role of a community manager is to see the overall picture even beyond. So when the situations come into my office, I assist. I don't think there's as much time spent by the operations manager. Now, Tim, of course, helped train Jim because he was a past service area manager, but in general, the operations manager doesn't really oversee much with the service areas.
It's
Suzanne,
because
I
they
have
have
a
a full-time
question.
person.
I have a question for you this way, because we've kind of gone through this, and I mentioned this once before, when the Artisan Park adjustments changed with a different management company. And the way I recall is at the end of the year, there was a true up. Either they would owe us money or we would owe them money to go ahead and just get that started. And I think that's the way that we need to go ahead and execute this with all the other service areas as well. Because that system worked. And we had a better feel, and it needs to be treated almost like a completely separate community, meaning all portfolios 100%. And it's going to fluctuate, but with Brian's WAGs, we can go ahead and do this guess and then be more educated next round.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, I can live with the $300 fee. I just wanted a explicit conversation about where it was coming from and what we really knew and didn't know. Because I think there are going to be questions. It's an increase from what's been done. I think that what Kevin's saying about doing a true up probably makes sense. It's certainly more work to allocate and figure out, but ultimately, there is a benefit to a service area owner. And I think the idea of a portfolio manager is the right umbrella to put into that service area instead of just letting them, in a sense, coast on the back of everybody
The other
else.
owners. Seems to me there's 3 and maybe 4 steps in this.
Mhm.
What we've just done through Kevin's initiation a couple of meetings ago, and then this discussion, is look at this conceptually. So we have said, I mean, to shorten what Kevin said very well, make it fair and appropriate for the service area owners, make it appropriate for the rest of the owners. So I think we've agreed on that. To get to the second point was, we have some estimates for the percentages. We have some reality. 2 of the positions are 100%. And then we have some estimates of the others. Since those are estimates, I would like for 2022's budget, which is what we're working on, to get that a little more precise. And not through record keeping, but for you and whomever else to say, really, what was it really? And try to think even before your time to your predecessor, just try to think. Or you could even call your predecessor and his predecessor, call Todd, call Mike. No, in his role. And then, same
I'll
for you.
call her for
So
service.
get a better sense of what the real numbers are. So adjust Brian's for 2022. Third step is, as we're getting into Cyranet, then we can further make this more precise. You come up with the estimate that it was 4%, and in fact, it's 8%. So we adjust that for 23. And then perhaps the fourth thing, and this was going to someone's point about Spring Lake, where maybe we're spending more time on landscape, maybe your time is spent more on for Spring Lake on landscape, even though it's a contract. So there may be, rather than an equal amount across all service areas, maybe Spring Lake, just as an example, might have to, because we have better tracking. This is futuristic thinking, and maybe their portion is a little bit more because the actual time spent on that particular activity for that service area is more. So the point is, right now, we're at the level of service areas carrying their own, maybe futuristic for 23 or 24, different service areas might have different administrative fees. Is that making sense? That's in the future. We don't have data to support that.
I was gonna say, can
But
we
this-
do that? Can you do that? Each service area.
That's a question
Okay.
with the Cyranet and how
Oh, right,
how things get,
I would
Don't
think
know.
if we have good coding
if we
from
have
the
good coding.
finance
We have good
department,
coding.
then we should be able to just pull it.
We
and
might be able to
see,
pull, but that's,
that's future.
but for now, we've agreed in principle, service areas need to carry their own admin fee.
Mhm.
Now let's get a little more precise. And then third is for 2022, we'll have better tracking so we can make sure that these percentages of these first 4.
Right.
So I
And
think
making
that's where we
sure-
are.
And making sure that those people that are 100% dedicated to these are spending 100% of their time
Absolutely.
dedicated to service
Because
areas.
if we didn't have service areas, then we wouldn't have those people.
Right, I
So-
mean, let's
That's
just
the
go back
point.
to something you said earlier, Susanna. I agree with David totally. You said they're gonna, or Cindy said, we're gonna have a lot of roofing projects coming up. I mean, these roofs are about to be. Am I fair in saying, Tim, that somebody is going to be thinking about service areas 100% of their day going forward? It's just, we can't ignore them anymore. And I think if we're being honest, we haven't fully ignored them, but they've been kind of in the background. And to your point, now service areas need to be front and center. It's going to be where a lot of our resources are going to go, a lot of our time, a lot of our money, right? A lot of their money.
Yeah.
And we've got to start treating it as, when I first came on the board, the service area budget was an afterthought, really. I
That's
mean,
right. That's fair.
you know, and now I really appreciate the work that everybody's doing to
Absolutely.
put this
It's
together.
getting it right. It's getting it right.
I think so. So. thank you.
Well, and at
Yeah.
some point with all the projects, I mean, they may need even more support because
That's
there's
right.
going to be a
Well,
lot of projects going
we
on.
know
So
that,
we have
right?
to have
We
good
gotta do it right.
communication with grand managers as to how it's working.
Could we take a moment to talk?
Full-time
okay.
employees, let's not forget that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah, no, I
Yeah.
see that. Yeah.
Could we take a moment just to talk about the, I know there was some discussion about if you budget for less bad debt or not. I know that was something you said, Brian, and I wasn't
I have a question
sure
about
what the
that.
board felt about that.
I have seen it impact one of our smaller service areas who doesn't have as many people paying into the fund, paying into the reserve. So when they experience bad debt, it impacts them in a greater percentage.
Well, I think.
Go ahead.
What we really should be doing here is looking at the items in orange at the top, which is the operating cash, the reserve cash, and the accounts receivable. And in the stuff that Tim, and I assume Jim sends out now, we identify upcoming projects and stuff like that. But I'm going to pick on Blue Sage. If you have $1,866 in operating cash, you don't have enough cash. And if you have, we really need on the accounts receivable now to start looking at an aging, because if you have $51,000 of accounts receivable, are they all current, or is 2/3 of them older than 180 days? That ought to drive our bad debt calculation. And do we have that, Cindy or Susanna? Do we actually have an aging on the account receivable?
That's probably the one thing I didn't bring.
They,
All
I
right.
didn't bring an age. I
they
just
would
picked up the-
eventually, the fees would eventually get paid back when it closes or changes hands or goes into litigation or Arias Bossinger does their
Right.
collections. So at some point, the fees eventually come back, but that doesn't solve the question of, do they have enough?
In the middle.
The cash, the cash
Right.
flow. That's the best.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great point. So,
So-
and Cindy's mentioned that too, that the rate of service areas paying is very well. But then you get to June and those people, 3 of them or so haven't paid yet, then you don't have the money until you wait to get to December, November or somewhere. So
'Cause
then
they
you
pay-
end up with that kind of situation in the middle. And yes, Brian, we do have the ability to print a report that shows how many people are 60, 90, et
It would be
cetera,
helpful to know
days.
that. I mean, so this $51,000 in accounts receivable at Academy Row just seems like, again, an anomaly. If we look across all the other service areas, nobody else has got more than 12,000, and then suddenly we've got 51,000. So what's
That
going on?
service area has always had very good financial standing. I believe it was because, if I remember when I first started in service area, it was because they hadn't done their roof at the time. They were waited a year, so that money accumulated an extra year that they didn't use. And so
But
and
why the
it-
accounts
and-
receivable? That should be dues that, I mean, doesn't that
Oh,
reflect dues that haven't
right.
been paid?
I'm thinking about, yeah.
Yeah, that's
thinking
a
about
bill, that's a
reserve.
bill that we've billed and hasn't been
I
paid
mean,
yet, right?
Functionally, isn't that what would have to be?
Mhm. Yep.
So why do we have a $51,000 accounts receivable in Academy Row? What's going on?
Yeah.
I mean, is it a rent strike?
I don't believe so. Brian, do you have any insight into that one? We lost Brian. Brian, are you there?
No, I have no clue at all. Yesterday I asked Cindy to add accounts receivable because I thought it was something we needed to look at.
Yeah, that brings, it truly is an anomaly.
If they're billed
Yeah.
quarterly or how. If they're billed monthly, then it might explain the whole thing.
Can we look, so you're gonna look into that for us
Mhm. Yeah,
and
the
find
aging
out
on
what that,
Academy Row.
okay. Thank you for taking that note. Yeah, it's a
Do we
lot.
want to increase assessments like, say, Blue Sage that has very, like you said, they only have $1,800 in cash? Do you want to do something that will adjust the budget to build up their cash balances?
Well, yeah, I mean, look at their percentage of increase. It's 1%.
Mhm.
How? And they have $1,800 in cash.
Well, that's just proposed.
Right, but I,
Proposed, yeah, that, and I think she's raising the question is, should it
Yeah,
be
right.
more?
But
I agree.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Right, as-
The
as-
answer needs to
right
be
now, this
checked
just
because they're the
covers
ones
it.
that had everybody walking out there because they want stuff fixed up.
So we need, if that's what's gonna happen, and we've talked about, and they're just now forming their service area committee, so they'll be participating in this conversation, correct?
Well,
At some
the
point?
next meeting, you sign the volunteers. So after
Okay.
that, yes.
So I think we need to talk about that and what we're gonna increase in landscaping and replacement to get that up to the standards, because right now it's not up to Celebration standards, and there's repairs and replacements that need to be done and some trees that need to come out as
That'll
well.
come out of reserves,
we've got
yes,
the
no,
same issue
maybe.
in Oak Pond with a 1% increase, but only
Yep.
$8,000 in cash.
Yeah,
I
but that's
think-
only 6 people though. Oak Pond only has 6 units, if that's correct.
Mhm.
So 6 units, $8,000 is much better than 12 units at 1,800.
Right,
Just-
many times.
Just help my poor little brain here.
I
How
would-
did we come up with these percentage increases?
Just based on actual bills, right? Because you took actual bills and contract amounts and put those in for the expenses. And that's where it ended up.
So we didn't set a target and say, we're aiming for this target and this is what it would take to get us to the target. Is there a reason that we are doing it that way, Brian, versus setting a target for each service area and then just moving funding to that target?
We've never really discussed it, so we've just never had a strategy.
So,
What would your suggestion be about a strategy?
well, I can say in the past, we took the expenses based on last year and we projected what they would be this year on the things that weren't fixed. And then you accounted for your reserves. And then you came out with it was a very easy in and out
You backed
budget.
into it.
And whatever's
Yeah.
left over, and then you look at what was last year and that's your increase.
Because it's basically a net zero. It's a
Yes,
zero
it's-
budget. We're
It's a
not-
zero
But
budget. And
that
there's,
brings up, you bring up the question is a zero budget, is that correct? And
Yeah.
it may not be.
I'm going back to Kevin's point about management and at a broader level. Should we be saying, instead of saying, oh, look, this is what happened, and we're reactive every year, and we say, this is what happened last year, and now we're going to react to adjusting your budget up or down. Should we not consider at least saying, here's what we really want to have in every service area's budget or in their accounts at the end of the year, and we're going to assess the right amount to get you to that number?
What I think we should do, and let me just throw this out as a suggestion. We've got operating cash and reserve cash. I think we ought to set for reserve cash, we've got the amount here, but it would be easy to say, what did the reserve study say they should have for cash? Because we haven't done that. comparison.
Yeah.
So that would be an easy comparison. And then for operating cash, I think we got total expense down below. We ought to say that the standard ought to be a percentage of annual operating expense. I mean, we can argue whether it should be 20%.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good sound budget process. That sounds like, and that's probably standard in the industry to say, you need to have this much versus what your reserve. That sounds like a
Right,
good.
because if you look at East Village, they've got 12,436 of expense and 18,000 of cash. They're rich. You know, Golden Aster's got 6,000 and they hold 26,000 in cash.
Right.
You know, if you take Blue Sage, they got 24,000, 1,800 of cash is too darn light. So most of them are darn near. I mean, if you go out to Parkview, it looks like it's 10%, but we all know part of the story there. You know, so that's how I think we ought to attack this.
Yeah, I agree.
I like that balance of saying it's a percentage of operating.
and then I think on top of that, you, now that we have 8 service areas almost, you sit down with the service areas and you say, well, you know, what are your concerns? What are the things that you want to see happen next year? And if you want those things to happen, this is how much we need to allocate for that.
Right.
Yeah, so I was going to go there. So for the 22 budget, which is right around the corner, we need service area committee involvement soon. At least some involvement just to say this is what and why, and unless you see different. But I think looking towards the 23 budget, get them involved in a more organized, planful way to say, what's it going to take to get to celebration standards? How about even higher than celebration standards? What else do you want to see? Because we need to be more planful as we look at our budgets for 23 and 24 and so forth. So to start to build these things up. But I think
completely agree.
involvement of the committees, absolutely.
Brian, could you put together what you just described for us?
In my spare time while I'm bored right after pickleball.
Well,
Yeah.
tell me,
So
tell me what kind
operating-
of formula that you're thinking of, Brian.
He said the operating cash should be a percentage, right?
Tell you what I will do. I will lay out a Excel spreadsheet that shows what I think we ought to do. Then Cindy and Susanna can drop in the data. And I'll do that even with the prior year data and stuff like that, because the conversation's been good here. I mean, and I think we've been remiss, and I'll blame the old treasurer. We all know who that is.
That
for
guy.
Putting a better construct in place here.
Scallywag.
I think it was on the assistant treasurer.
Was it?
Yeah,
It was, that was a
well,
delegated
yeah.
responsibility of the assistant treasurer a couple of years ago.
So I'll be happy to lay out a guideline that what I think this ought to look like. I'll send it to the entire board. And then I think it'd be easy for Cindy and Susanna to drop in the data.
And
Thank
then
you.
that gives us, if you will, data, good rationale, which also includes the revision of the whole administration fee. for the dialogue with the existing committees and hopefully the future service area committees. But I think we have to get them involved because board's gonna sign off on this.
Soon. It's
end of
already-
October, beginning of October.
End of October, beginning November.
End of October. So
It
we
has
need
to
to
be
target
communicated.
1 month from now, service area committee involvement, because this is gonna get voted on.
Yeah,
who I
we'll
would also-
probably, my goal is we need to do that in the next week or so, because then you have to send out your notices, have your budget meetings with the entire service area, and then you get it to the board. So we have a few steps.
Yeah,
before
yeah,
it comes
understand.
back to
Thank you for
you.
that. Thank you for that.
And I
Detail,
would,
all the details.
Yes.
Sorry.
I know we're in
Long
transition,
process.
but I would also, I mean, I would think that maybe Bear Manners maybe has a formula that maybe they would recommend that they have used in previous communities or service areas.
In terms of like what we were just talking about
Yeah,
with
so
Brian.
what they feel is good, you know,
Although just to be clear, service areas are as Kevin pointed out, a uniquely celebration
that's true.
affectation. So
Yeah.
thank you, Mouse.
Yeah, that was put together differently than most communities are built. So I agree.
Okay,
Good thought.
so when we leave here, I will make the adjustment on the landscape management for Academy Row because that's an obvious error. I don't know how fast I'm going to get an answer from the water company on Charleston Place. I don't get one within the next few days. Do you want me to plug a number in there?
Look back in history.
No,
No, there's been no history.
No,
That's the
none at all,
problem.
none at all.
Yeah, that's
It's
the problem.
been screwed up a long time.
we gotta get water right. So we need June 30 or July 30.
There's no water. They've never been charged for water, Brian.
Yeah, that's the
That's the
problem with the June
problem.
30s. They're not accurate.
Could we
Well,
compare it to?
Then we
the
need to figure out
other-
what is accurate and take it times 2. If I was in those areas, I would push back hard on us.
Could we take it to, and base it on how many units in another area that we know was billed properly and then
Yeah, I mean, I could,
extrapolate that out?
I could plug
I mean,
in
if
a
you
number.
say,
That's what I'm asking because I
Gold
don't
Master
know.
was charged correctly and
We
that
can
bill
look
was
at
this
them.
much per
Yeah,
house or
Hartree has a
per
lot of
unit.
landscaping, but we can look at it.
Just a
see if we
thought.
can-
Because I've been in contact with my new best friend at the water company every day for the last week. But like I said, I don't, the last conversation I had was, well, that meter doesn't match any of the meters we have. And then I was directed to the reclaimed water bill for the park, for the, what do you call that place where there's the pool and is there a name for
The
that?
Mew, are you
On the boulevard, where the pool is and is there a name for that section of land? Well, whatever it is, she directed me to there and I said, no, that's our pool and our park and
Oh, the
the
common
picnic
areas
table. Yeah, that
outside by
common
the-
area
by the
there. She
boulevard.
directed me there. I said, no, that's not it. You need to go to this address and dig, in the front yard there, and there's a meter there. So we need to know who's paying for it and, what that payment
Yeah, They
is.
should be able to just track it back from the physical meters, but they don't know.
She said
what
the
they're
meter
billing.
number doesn't match anything she has. I gave her the
So
address.
they not billing anyone for it?
I don't know.
That could be possible.
Cindy's been doing
could be
some really awesome investigative reporting, I have to say.
She is like,
She's
You are
she's
doing good.
uncovered.
We're gonna give you a-
Pretty good.
Gold star.
But,
After this, I think she's gonna settle into a PI.
there you
Yeah,
go.
there you go.
Well, some of this is that
It
you
is.
are doing that,
Yes.
but maybe they haven't billed anyone for it. But let's.
I don't
We
know.
need to have, we
We
need to
need-
have money in there.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
because
right.
they are gonna get billed
Well,
at
I
some
will
point
keep-
when we correct it.
Hopefully when I get home, I'll have an email from her. And that'll give me a clue, but then I'll do something like percentages of units and, you and I will get together and talk about how much actual landscaping there is around there compared to the others and we'll come up
Okay,
with
we
something.
can pull a
but-
new leaf
Or-
too.
or if you-
Jacob will help us
Yeah.
with that.
Or a few other sites, maybe it's multiple service areas where we can
Yeah.
track that.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay,
So if the water bill,
okay.
and you're gonna tell us how you want to increase cash, Brian, right?
He said he'd provide you with a
Yep.
formula that just needs numbers plugged.
I will do it for 2 or 3 things we've addressed there. Probably accounts receivable aging, reserve cash, operating cash, and then the change between prior year and here. So that I'll just lay out a guide.
Okay. Okay.
Susanna,
I see
what point do you have to,
Oh, there's a comment, there's a
at
resident.
what point do you
comment.
have to contact service areas to say, here's the proposed budget for you in East Village, Golden Aster, Green Lawn, et cetera?
I believe we should send this to the service area committees by next week.
Okay, okay, so we need some resolution.
By
on-
next week, what?
Next week.
mean,
That would be by
what part of
Friday.
next week?
If you want the whole. week, it's by
Thursday,
Thursday, yeah, that's fine.
maybe.
Look,
I
was just hoping it wasn't Tuesday.
We could give them this set of numbers now. We're always able to revise a budget post,
Yeah, that's
right?
fair.
So, I mean,
Well, and
This is-
maybe a little, some blurbs that say, this is what, these are the accounts we're still investigating.
Yeah, and yeah, like with Charleston Place, we still haven't gotten water resolved, so we're getting that, or, so.
am I wrong, though, that procedurally we could
You could, well,
revise the
the
budget?
service area committees are one thing, so you can send it to them and kind of get their feedback and say, this is where we're going. But when you have the service area meeting with the entire service area, you kind of have to have your proposed budget
It's
set.
pretty
That
much
doesn't
this is-
happen next week.
No,
My
that'll
point is
happen in the
happens
next
You could
few
take the
weeks.
existing budget as it's proposed here, send that out to the committees with a cover letter that just says the board is working on these higher level issues and detailed issues.
Mhm.
And I don't think you have to wait, at least in my view, to send that out. It's
I agree.
it's in development.
Yeah,
So-
I could send that
And
to
to
them
give
by
it-
this
it's a
end of this
first-
week.
It's a first look.
And it would be
End of
email,
this
you
week.
know.
So before you do that, I think there's two
We
things
do have a comment
across
online.
all of the service areas that we've talked about. One is Brian's recalculation of the master stuff. And the other is the homework to staff of how do we adjust what Brian had as draft percentage of time for those personnel? So let's get that, those two pieces we can finalize, because that'll go up or down, and then that's in the budget. And then the individual service area burrs or unresolved issues can be noted.
The burrs.
Burrs.
That's good.
That's not a
That's a
northern word.
big term.
No, but the.
Yeah,
the-
I
the-
understand.
the few-
Individual
the
challenges.
half a dozen or less
Got it.
individual items that we've noted.
Okay.
Okay,
See what
So
Joe-
I think we can resolve those the first two based on Brian and your staff time.
Please call on Joseph so we can see if he's got something.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I lost my Zoom connection, but I am alerted that Joseph has a comment. So Joseph?
Hi, Joseph Lenahan, 1258 Celebration Avenue. I'm a member of the Roseville Corner service area. And I look forward to those meetings every year with Susanna about the particular budgets for the particular setups for the service areas. But I have a question, and we'll handle all the specifics at that point. But I want to go back to Jackson's comment that service areas are a celebration thing. So what would be a better way of handling that if not a service area, since we are now more self-governed than what Disney had set up in the past?
Well, it's not, I appreciate it, Joseph. The problem is we're subject to the PUD and the original development
Supplementals.
documents. It's not like we can wave a wand and say service areas don't exist. Disney created, the Celebration Company created service areas as another layer in which they were able to allocate expenses initially and manipulate is the best word I can come up with. Kevin might have another one, to handle governance. And in general, you don't see those subgroups within an HOA. It's an unusual structure. Now, you see more of it today than you did 25 years ago, but basically Celebration pioneered that. So I make the comment in the sense that Grand Manners has said to me, for example, we don't see service areas anywhere. I mean, there's nothing really about that. Typically, the HOA as a master would take care of all of those things. But because we had these pieces in there, in most communities, you'd have condominiums. You know, Roseville Corners would be a condominium. I mean, that's typically what you would see. So they created this new heretofore unknown thing and they called it a service area.
So
Oh.
for clarification, it's something in the original governing documents and cannot be adjusted at this time,
That's correct.
I'd
nor,
like-
nor in the future.
Well, who knows the future? I'm not a lawyer and I'm not offering legal advice, but it's my understanding in talking to Tom Slayton, when we looked at the recreation fees and some other things, we looked at those early 1996 documents. It's pretty clear that multifamily units were designed and excluded from the regular HOA in the original set of documents. They were set apart. So.
right. So if you look on the website under governing documents and you scroll down, there's all the supplementals and there's a supplemental for each service area. And so what happened is as the builder as they were completed and they came on, just like Island Village, you record the supplemental with the county and that lists all the responsibilities. And so, for instance, we have another property, CMC has another property in Tallahassee, and their service area, everything gets covered, every single thing. But the way the supplementals for Celebration were done, only certain things, painting, roofing, et cetera, mostly generally about 5 items. But also the positive part about that is that when you have homeowners sharing one building, it's good to take care of those projects all at once, to have it in the responsibility of one person, because then you know that the building's going to get painted all the same color and it's going to look nice. The roof's going to get replaced and all at once and be good. The landscapes, you're not going to have one homeowner that's not doing their landscape, another person that is, and then it looks, off balance. So that is the positive part of it. So I don't think it's unique to Celebration, but I do think that they didn't kind of go all out or not. They kind of did this hybrid thing for different ones, and that's made it challenging for everybody.
Okay, that's just a good base, high level explanation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph.
All right, where do we need to go next?
Next item on the agenda.
Are we done with?
Are we done with service areas? Are we?
This was a good discussion.
It was, yeah, I agree. Okay. And then we had, yeah, I know,
tried.
both Cindy and Susanna and Brian, you guys have been doing
Yeoman's work.
lots of work on this, and it definitely shows, I think we've definitely moved forward to a higher level on this.
Tim, dear, would you give me the correct number for the Academy Row landscape?
I
right.
sent it to you.
Oh, you will?
Yeah, I did send it to you, but I'll
Okay.
send it
Oh, you
again.
did?
Okay.
Yes, I did. I'll send it to you again.
Okay.
Okay, the next
I
item
never
on the
had-
agenda was
didn't do
actually the follow-up from the previous board meeting
Yeah.
on the actual CROA questions that had come up. And
Yeah,
for some reason, Zoom keeps kicking me off, so,
I want to,
oh, there, I'm back on.
can I start with one
You
item?
go right ahead.
You remember that one of the items that we talked about was the capital funding and where it came from with apartment recreational fees and so on. I did a deeper dive with Tom Slayton this week, and I'm going to try and encapsulate what he said. I think that Susanna sent to all of the board a document from 1996 that was the how would I describe that, Susanna?
It's it's a supplement too,
Yes.
actually.
was
And it
a
had the
supplement written-
calculation.
So 1996, communities just coming on board, drafted by an attorney, some of you remember, Larry Pitt. And this document was the basis of how the community assessed apartments and back then, multifamily, including condominiums. Who knew, right? And the point was, we didn't have a capital contribution fund back then. It was just their assessment that went into the overall operating funds, as best I can tell. If you look at that document in section 3.2A, it has the calculation. Remember, we talked about the numerator and the denominator. And the numerator, I love using math words. The numerator was the number of doorways. And the denominator, according to that paragraph, was to be all recreational amenities, the expense for construction, maintenance, repair, everything, plus the reserves for those amenities. Okay, interesting. Then over time, apparently, there were some amendments made to take out the condominiums and the multifamily from this payment, which again, just to be clear, wasn't going into a capital fund. The capital fund was something the board decided, I don't know when, Brian, was it 2010, 2011? When we started doing capital funding, we set up a capital account and we said, we're going to assess a transfer fee and an apartment recreation fee. And so we took money that was going into the operating funds and we just moved them apparently as a board into this new thing called a capital fund. Everybody with me? So at that point, what was happening was we were not actually calculating the denominator number correctly, it appears, because we weren't putting the replacement reserve amount in for the total in that denominator. It was just the cost to upkeep. It was just the regular,
Annual fees,
Annual
annual expenses.
yes. So for some period of time, we have underfunded what that apartment recreation fee should be. So Brian and I talked this week. Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're going to go back and look at adding in the reserve amounts that are applied to all the amenities. So as an example, the CCFC fields, which were expensive, now have not just a run rate, but they also have a replacement cost.
Right.
And the replacement cost for the year should be calculated into this fee.
Right.
So it's my guess that when we do all of that, even though we've got more apartments, we'll have a larger denominator, and I suspect the number will go up, but I have no idea by how much. Is that accurate, Brian? Brian has left.
I think you're probably right. If you bounce down on the sheet here to the apartment rec, or somebody wants to let me share the screen.
Yeah.
Or bounce down to,
Page number?
Yeah, page, Brian.
no, one of them. Just keep,
There's a number at the bottom.
just do page down.
Oh, the second one.
Next page, just keep going next page. That's not it. Go-
Page two, page
go- Keep
two.
going, keep going, keep going,
No?
keep going. Wait, go right up.
Go back, yeah, that one.
Apartment
it.
rec fee. So here you got
What page
Five,
are we on?
oh,
five, no,
6.
6.
Jackson. Look at the second line, replacement reserves funding.
Oh, it is in there.
821 and 839, right there.
So it is in there.
It is in there.
Where?
Page
Page
6.
Page 6.
6.
So what?
We were going
Six
from
of 26.
But it is in there.
However, I do have just one thing, and I appreciate the research that Jackson, you've gone through, and Suzanne, and the document you pulled out, and the conversations with Tom. One of the things that you mentioned was actually construction costs, was it not?
Yes.
And that is something that has not been contributed to, especially when we look at our largest projects, correct?
I don't see it. I don't see that as a line.
How in the heck would you, in all seriousness, how would you include construction costs?
Okay, got it.
Essentially, the same way we've done anything else, a capital improvement, a construction budget. So let's talk about the popular pickleball. If we turned around and said, hey, we plan to build pickleball within the next 2 years, this is the expected cost, start building it into that recreation budget that is then shared amongst all. And then again, we go ahead and we recognize where does it actually end up. But that's my one
Yeah.
huge hang up on this. With all the improvements that we're doing things that probably weren't expected by TCC, to be frank, because the area that we're building in was to be a road. So this, I don't believe that was part of their plan. We
So-
need to recognize that that is a large figure.
So
Go ahead.
question is, someone's putting money into replacement reserves, then that ends up in a pot of money. Then we spend it on a new amenity. I don't think a person should be charged twice.
Yeah, but that's replacement. That's not
Replacement
new.
reserves are fixing.
So, but if it's,
Replacement is not
so
construction,
replacement
yeah.
reserves and then capital improvements.
It's a
Yeah,
new
These
one.
it's
different
really
items.
part of it's part of the calculation rather than an actual
Yeah,
assessment.
okay.
I think where I would go, thank you for showing this to me, and I apologize that I missed it.
Well, no, we had the conversation yesterday and I forgot about it too. So it's both of us.
Okay. I would be curious where the actual, how the calculation is done of the replacement reserves funding. In other words, do we obviously have to allocate within replacement reserves any reserves for any amenity? How do we figure out which amenities? They're the obvious big ones, but
All of it.
Reserve study.
It's all based on the reserve study.
This is all CROA stuff, whether you're talking about the 851 building, whether you're talking about a park, whether you're talking about a pool, if this is everything.
Everything.
that's the full replacement amount?
Yep.
So we didn't back out anything. It's all replacement reserves for CROA?
Yeah, it's all there. Because they have access to any amenity.
It's only the amenity.
Existing amenities. We need a new line item then. Isn't that what
I
we're?
guess
That's
what
what he
I'm
just said.
saying is I'm not confident that
800,000 is the right number.
Yeah, I'd like to see a
Looks
detail.
Well, no, I don't understand what.
He's worried that if we had to replace all of our amenities, 800,000 would not be enough. But
No,
that's
it's-
based on the reserve study, right?
Absolutely, it's absolutely for all amenities based on the reserve study. I'll be happy to show it to you. I mean,
So does
And
the
that's
reason,
annual, that's annual.
that's the annual piece. Yes.
So Jackson, that
Okay.
might be like for 851, the AC for 60,000. And then over in Long Meadow, it might be 50,000 for plants. And
Yeah.
then.
I'm not sure that's what the original agreement anticipated. I'm not,
yeah,
I'm going to ask Tom if it's okay with you all to look at that section 3.2A and see if, because it's a pretty specific calculation of what's supposed to be included in there.
It's a denominator.
Yeah, I'm just not sure the denominator number is right.
well, and that drives the whole
Kind of,
fee,
yeah.
yeah. But it's clear the replacement or the construction costs are not in this budget.
There's nothing in here for new.
Yeah, I don't even know how you would do construction. That I'm struggling with that one.
It would
Yeah.
just have to be based on a proposed budget. Or it would have to be paid in arrears after something is already constructed,
Yeah.
if you have to use actual
You know,
numbers.
but you're not doing that. Right now, we're not doing that with that's a difficult argument, and I'm not sure how you do it. I'm not saying.
Well, to be fair, how will we do improvements, and why would it be fair to only have construction costs on ownership for something that is for the enjoyment of all?
Yeah.
If they get to use it, they should, was the whole point, that they should participate in the repair and the replace and the building and replacement. Because if we build a new
That was the
amenity, they
original
have access.
contract, yeah.
But isn't the money that the apartments provide through the rec fee going into the capital funding, which is used for the new amenity?
But not the right amount of money, because the figure that they're getting is only for replacement and for operation and maintenance.
So what you could do here, because if you go all the way back up to the first page, sorry. Because if we remember our capital funding, we had capital funding, which was when you buy a property, the one, that $1,000 there.
One-time fee.
We had capital funding from the apartment rec fees, and then we were talking about, and this, I put it in here for conversation purposes, capital funding residents there. You see the third line in the revenues there.
Yeah.
The 25, 30, and 35, I just put it in as a placeholder so we could have the conversation. You could charge them there for that type of an item. Because otherwise they're not buying a property and they're paying the apartment rec fee right now, which is going to building things. So you could actually come back and argue that they are paying, because they're paying into the apartment rec fee, which goes to capital, that they're paying a substantial amount into construction.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would agree with that, because the way their figure is determined is based on actual cost.
That's the point.
That's so while yes, you can follow that path, the numbers won't match up for construction or new development.
So do we need to get with Tom and?
I believe we do. I would like to do a deeper dive in looking at the documents and just figure out what our authority is and what the actual formula is. It's old and convoluted, and
But we're still governed by it.
we
So
are
we
still
have to
governed
use
by
it.
it. There've been a couple of amendments to it, but they did not change the formula. They just changed who was affected by it.
And
And Jackson, when you do speak with Tom, if you could ask him if there may be a better way, such as a specific assessment, a special assessment for when development does happen. So let's say we had a $500,000 project.
Right.
What's the better way to go about this?
Okay.
And
sure.
so what else, because I may not know, what else funds the capital funding? It's the resales, correct, for new owners? So do the existing owners put money towards
No,
the
and that's-
capital
and
funding?
That's exactly the point.
Okay,
So let's just back up for a minute. Thank you
Right.
for opening that
Right.
door.
sorry.
No, you're good.
The board
As
has,
you
the
said.
board has received voluminous comment from residents about pickleball, as an example. Many of those people have said, don't you spend my money on a new pickleball court. Some of those are residents who've lived in the same home in Celebration for 20 plus years. During that time, they have contributed exactly $0 to the capital fund because they didn't buy or sell property and they weren't renters. Therefore, not a dollar of their money is in the capital fund. And yet, the most vocal discussion, whether pro or con, about something like pickleball is coming from people who have no skin in the game. None. The only people who have contributed towards building anything have been those people that bought or sold a residential property and those people who are renters. That's it. So the question that we asked at the last meeting was, and Brian has put in a placeholder called capital funding residents. Maybe what we should be doing now is taking a part of the homeowner's assessment and targeting that to a capital fund. Because if we're going to talk about building community centers and parking lots and $5 to $10 million projects, we're past the little stuff. We're past the little passive parks and the $100,000 projects. We're in the $1 million projects now. And maybe we ought to start behaving like that needs to be done.
I appreciate it. I just want one point of clarification. When you mention renters, it is specific to apartment building renters, not garage apartments, not
That's correct.
single family
Yes.
homes that are renting
Correct.
something.
Correct.
Just
Correct.
for clarification.
Yes,
Correct.
that's correct. It's a very narrow grouping, right? And so that made sense when we had smaller capital projects. It didn't make sense when we went to the community fields, but we were behind the curve there and we didn't know what to do with it. But look at the list of projects that we are looking at, and virtually none of them come in under $500,000 anymore. So if we're talking about these big projects, shouldn't that be spread across the entire 4,321 plus apartment rentals, right? Plus, I mean, to me, we're just not funding very intelligently.
I think that's a discussion that we need to have about how we fund it.
So a clarification, this is to Brian. And I just wanted to clarify something Jackson just said. In this updated page 2, we have highlighted capital funding, rec fees, apartments, capital funding, resident sales. Jackson just referenced
Go to page 2.
for residents. So I don't see a third line there, or is it there?
No, it's only.
So the resident sales is the new sales or the resales, correct?
Right.
So we have, still have nothing for existing homeowners.
Okay. No, because it is there, because there's capital funding rec fee apartments, which is the 577, and the resident sales. You can't add a third revenue item because it is now included in those association dues. So when you take the 108 see the 108 in green down there?
Yep.
That is the 577 up above, plus the 468, plus the capital funding from residents, which is included in the association dues. So in other words, because now we're adding it to homeowners association dues, because the capital funding rec free apartments is a specific bill to the apartments. And the resident sales is a specific bill that's taken care of when a home is sold and goes through the title company and such. So
Aren't you just saying, Brian, that you're taking the 5302 number and you're backing out some amount of that directed towards,
that's exactly what I'm saying.
okay. So we're not, so to be clear, we're not talking about raising assessments for the purpose of capital funding. We're simply saying we're going to move some amount of the association dues into a capital account, just like we made a decision, we meaning the CROA board at the time, made a decision to set up a capital fund and allocated the relocation fee, the resident sales and the rec fee apartments from operating into something called the capital account. Is
So
that
what-
accurate?
What we can do here, whoever's running the computer, is if you go to the rec fee apartments and capital funds page, just bounce down a couple pages, that 108 there. Because David,
Right.
it's a very good one. So
Where's that?
keep going. Right there. So go up. Okay. See the 108 in the bottom right-hand corner there?
Yep.
Yes.
That now includes, see that resident annual fee, the 25, 30, and 35 in green?
Yep.
So this is what you had saw before. It had the homeowner's annual assessment.
Okay.
And
Okay.
for resales, it had Island Village, which we all understand. It has the apartment rec fees, and now it includes that annual fee. So that's shows it to you, David.
So then, I know this is a budget. What then happens if home sales are down? The resales or the new sales? And what happens if it goes up?
If it goes up, we get more money. If it goes down, we get less. I mean, we have been doing
Okay.
stronger in recent years because sales have been great. If we hit a recessionary year like happened in 2010, 11, 9, it's going to go down.
Right. So just to clarify, if the market goes great and there's many more sales than this has, that means more contribution to capital funding, correct?
That is a
Yeah.
correct statement.
And then if the opposite is true, it's less funding for capital improvement.
Right.
It doesn't affect keeping the lights on.
Absolutely.
That's just,
And
because
if
we
the
pay as
cost-
we
if
go
the
on
cost of
capital.
operating-
We pay as we go on capital
Because we don't-
improvements.
If the
we don't
cost of
spend more.
operating those amenities and replacing them goes up, the denominator, then the apartment fee probably goes up
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
there's a huge increase in the number of doors.
Got it.
Which we
Yeah.
hope we will have a big increase when Island
Well, that's only
Village.
three
is-
The
hundred.
Island Village is already reflected in here.
Yeah.
Right, and that
That's
is
right.
already
The
reflected.
Kessler unit is the big change right now.
Right,
Yes,
because
it
that's
is.
coming
Okay.
online.
So,
Good,
Okay,
helpful, very helpful.
so
Got
I
it.
just wanted to be clear, if anybody's listening or if they hear this later, we are not raising homeowner assessments for capital funds. I mean, the assessments may go up, but it's not because of that. We are simply allocating a portion so that now when people say you're using my money for capital funding, the answer would be, yes, we are. Right?
Yeah,
Can I make a kind of off the wall suggestion? And I probably,
Oh, please don't.
well, no,
Oh, Cindy,
They're
go
not-
for it. Let me
obviously,
know.
you only keep records, financial records for, I don't know, 7 years, 10 years, depending what it is. Why don't you call CCMC and see if they have any of the CROA financials from like 2004? Just the income statement and balance sheet, because we had apartments back then. And there might be a number in there that will guide us to how they calculated it at that, I mean, just for informational purposes.
We know how they calculate it. It comes totally from this original 1996 document.
Well, I know, but I'd like to see how they were treating
Oh.
it back then, just for S and
just
Gs.
to-
Yeah,
You
good
know.
luck with that.
Well, I mean, it could be a good comparison if it's available.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah.
sure, but good luck. I mean,
Yeah, well, so I
We hear
said, you're not required to keep that, but with,
my guess is, as a longtime resident, I think this was a very squishy thing that happened. I think that when the board made a decision to set up a capital fund, it was a reaction to purchasing this building and trying to work with that. But I don't think they ever contemplated, frankly, that we would be talking about $4 million ball fields or $1 million plus pickleball or whatever it might be. And so I just don't think there was much forward thinking.
There was
about
never a
that.
budget associated with it.
Correct. It
There
was
was
just
never
a,
a budget or a strategic plan that said, this is what the 5-year plan is, this is what the 10-year plan is, and we have to fund it.
Yeah.
That it was just a number.
well, and it was after we
we-
bought the building too.
Mhm.
Can we agree that Jackson, when he talks to Tom Slayton, will ask him if this resident annual fee allocation for capital funding is something we're allowed to do?
yeah. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
will.
I've thrown it in here as a placeholder, but I have no clue legally if we can do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I will, because I'm not clear what the authority was to set up the capital fund in the first place.
Right.
There has, Susanna, maybe you could go back and find the board resolution that established the capital funding, whatever that language was. I have been unable to find it. There must have been a board decision, a resolution, something that created this piece, because it was not in the original documents. It was not part of what we did.
The one-time capital.
Lee-
fund.
Right. It
As I
happened somewhere
understand
around
It was a
there.
vote.
I
It
think
was a
Lee
vote.
Moore was I think Lee Moore was the president when they did it, and I'm thinking.
I think that's correct.
Who was?
Lee Moore.
More.
I've heard him reference it, and so I think it's somewhere during his tenure, if that helps narrow it down.
Suzanne, if you reached out to Lee Moore, he can actually tell you when it was done, because he has told me before.
I remember voting on it as a homeowner.
Yeah.
That,
Well, see, that's interesting, because if you had to vote on it as a
Interesting.
homeowner, I don't remember that. But if you
I
had to
did,
vote
I
on it as a
think I did,
homeowner,
unless my memory's gone, but I,
it wouldn't have been a
remember.
new assessment, though, and existing homeowners didn't have to pay anything. So, and where did the residential resale amount come from? Right? It seems like,
That was like 14 or 15, as I recall.
I don't know.
so we need to pull, you want to see that, I agree, I think we should look at the
I like the
governing doc,
legislative history.
Yeah.
the governing documents that allow us to do this, right?
And I've asked Tom Slayton to try and find those as well. He's coming in later today. Maybe he will have discovered them, but so far he's not.
Okay,
I just remember a letter going out.
yeah, I remember, and I
Yeah, that's
swear,
right.
I
It was just a
I don't,
swear it
I don't
was a
remember
vote.
voting on
Yeah, I
anything.
don't either.
yeah,
So-
maybe I'm
so-
wrong. but
I was something wrong too.
So I know we're looking at some of the loose ends from last time.
Yeah.
Thank you for this revision, Brian. I have one loose end. Only one,
Only one?
and it's not going to change the dollars. That's good news. Page 13, it's highlighted in green. Where you've listed, part of the discussion last time was about Garden Club. We have not yet discussed their proposal. And what we had talked about last week is just calling it miscellaneous. So I would just propose a wording change here.
Can you
Garden-
bounce between
garden-
13?
Page 13, 1-3. I would just propose calling it Garden Club miscellaneous or miscellaneous/Garden Club. The point being, in their proposal, they're being very modest, like $1,500.
Go to the next one.
Page 13,
Go to the next one.
am I on a, oh, I'm sorry.
oh,
Let's go down so I can see it on the screen. I can't see it.
It's got a green bar across.
Right on the screen, can you bounce it down then?
That's
There you
it.
go.
That's it. I would just propose a new label. They're only asking for 1,500 maybe. And you know, they don't want to be perceived as committing to having to do $5,000 worth of project because they can't do that. They don't have the.
they don't have the
No,
ability.
they don't have the ability. They have some
That's a
ideas.
lot of pine straw.
There's a lot of, oh, donating
That's the
pine
only-
straw
I
to
think that's the only
the
way
winning
that-
resident. No, I would just, it's just a matter of labeling it miscellaneous or / Garden Club is so that there's a memory there, but it's not a commitment to them and only them. That's the whole point. It's a labeling issue, not a dollar issue.
Is that where it goes?
We didn't know. It was just a matter of having a placeholder. We don't know where it goes. It's a placeholder. Should we approve it?
Okay, that's easy.
That's easy.
The answer to your question is, Cindy, I don't know where the hell it goes. I looked all over. I decided here. And by the way, while
I
we're
appreciate your candor.
I don't know where the hell.
and on the welcome experience for new residents, we had arguments about $25,000. I choked on 25,000. I put in 7,500. But in the interest of fair play, I'll point that out. If people want to argue the amount, go ahead.
You're going to do what? In interest of fair play, do what?
Remember last week, some people.
No,
wanted the experience for residents.
Diana was the one lobbying for 20,000. She's out of the room.
Okay, somebody said 20 or 25,000, and I think Kevin and I both had a heart attack. So I put in 7,500 because I controlled the computer. And if we want a different number than 7,500, I'll listen to the conversation.
Let's defer till Diana comes back. She was pushing for more.
Yes.
It was the,
Oh, the
he
new
said, he
resident.
said he controls the computer, just to quote, and you can go
Who
back and
said
listen. Brian, you can go back and listen to the tape.
I will. Sorry, I had to step out for a moment.
7,500, and you
Yeah.
were asking for.
I was
more.
asking for quite a bit more than that because we want to do a new hire, new
How
resident.
about 10,000 there?
If we can do that, that would be a good start.
Joseph raised
I'm just
Go ahead,
looking at you.
Susanna,
I'm not
prove
your
it.
opinion.
Joseph's feedback.
The
I'd like to
vid-
hear Joseph's feedback too.
Say that again?
Joseph Linham's got his hand up. Let's hear his.
Oh,
feedback.
go ahead. Oh, yeah. If we've got a comment, go ahead, Joseph.
Brian, this is directed toward you. Where do you have the money that you dedicate toward the technology committee? Because the garden
That's it.
club could be considered another committee or club so that it could link together with that expense as well.
It's on the CJC expense. I hadn't even thought about that. Could Garden
Oh.
Club be
That's
considered?
a good spot for that.
Actually, that's a
For what?
good
For the
thought.
new, for the,
Mhm. The joint committee, maybe this is a joint committee expense.
Well,
good
what Sandy in the background here is telling me that they have strict regulations on how the money can be spent. Is that the Garden Club, Sandy, you're talking about? She's saying the Garden Club has very strict regulations. I don't know.
No. No,
No.
Garden Club is just enhancing their appetite for doing things. There was a meeting day before yesterday, their first meeting of the year. They're talking about some butterfly gardens around.
Yeah,
So-
David, it's all great opportunities and it's good that we could do that in the community. I'm trying to pull it back and saying that it's a dedicated or a partner program, similar to how the
Could be, we don't know.
technology club is.
We-
So can it be linked together just to find a spot for it? That's all I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
sounds similar to what you're dedicating toward the technology, committee because it's money allocated to a specific organization that is under CROA. So it could be an opportunity to keep it linked together.
I actually like Joseph's idea because if we move it to CJC, Vaughn, if you'll remember, Rita's part of the garden club, had talked about even, taking some of the entrance and having the garden club do flowers and stuff like that. CJC is where it belongs.
Yep.
I'm okay with it as long as as long as we fund it. I mean, my thought was it went under Parks and Rec, like the community
It was a
chorus,
placeholder, it was a placeholder.
but that's fine, as long as it's in
The
there.
garden club at 5,000 we moved. So now let's go back to the welcome experience and
Okay.
whatever that should be.
So the welcome experience with Grand Manners would like to do to build their sense of community is to welcome each resident into the community as a new homeowner when they close on their home and deliver to them some sort of a welcome kit, educational kit, as well
Welcome
as
wagon.
welcome. Basically, you and I are old enough to remember, we're all old enough to remember Welcome Wagon. Something like that. They would partner, they would provide things for the basket or box or whatever it would be. We would need to provide some support for that. They've also talked about asking for including local businesses to provide something of value to a new resident to orientate them to the community, as well as education piece of now you are here, this is what Grand Manners does, this is how you get this done, and build that education piece that you were the
Right,
new
that I'm
hire,
working on
the
with the
new resident
foundation, yeah.
orientation. So it's a physical gift or
There's
physical.
two, it's like there's several parts of that.
It's a swag bag.
Yeah, part of it is swag bag, part of it is
Yeah.
the in-face or in-person experience. So it's just having having a budget to figure out what we want to do. And it's a jump start. And then we pay Kevin's point from last time, then we can start to pare it back.
Yes, and well, and actually the thought was, we've done nothing over the last 2 years to welcome anyone in the community in the sense of
Yeah.
they moved in during a pandemic and there really hasn't been new hire orientation, new resident orientation. I keep saying new hire. Can you tell that's what I do? But we haven't really done it.
Back porch sign on and they'll know exactly what's going on.
What did you say?
I said something bad.
As I focus on hiring people. But anyway, we need something to welcome the new residents, again, to build that
Yeah.
sense of community. And this is something that's going to evolve over the next several
Well, and I think the
years.
foundation's interested in participating. in
I
that.
think they
Absolutely,
are,
sure,
I think,
absolutely.
I'm sure CROA would be interested in local businesses if they might have something to promote their businesses, which are part of our
All those
community.
details, we just.
All
need a
that has to
bu-
be
we
worked
need
out. I need a budget, yes.
We need a budget.
So the argument that was made by me and Kevin last week is it shouldn't just be CROA money because lots of people like to spend CROA money. Then let other people contribute too.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
fine with, and Grand Manners has already said they want
They'll
to,
contribute.
yeah, they want to be a part of that and contribute as well. So I do think, based on, I mean, how many homes are we going to turn this year, Brian?
Let's say 300 plus another 100 in
Island Village.
Island Village, so 400 homes.
So 7,500 divided by 400 is $18 a house. Now, if we would go back and actually pick up the ones from 2020 during pandemic, that'd be another 300, right?
Yeah, but they are already here. I mean, I wouldn't go backwards. I would make it prospective. People figure it out for better or worse.
Can we do 15,000? That's a number.
Yes, let's move on.
Okay.
Do I hear 17? Do I hear 17?
It's a rounding error, 15,000. It's not the term you use.
It's a placeholder.
It's a placeholder for something
While
that
we
is
get the
future
details worked out.
development, and we need to have some money to support it.
What does the rest of the board think? Diana's yes and I'm no. So everybody else tell me what number you want.
15,000.
I'd be happy with 10.
15.
So
7,500.
So I would say we have 3 votes for 15.
Sounds like a.
There you
sounds like a-
go.
I think there's a bad connection. I don't hear anyone online. We have a
Okay.
quorum right here. Yeah.
Okay,
You want
so,
to-
and there's,
12? How about 12?
that's fine.
How
I'm
about
fine
12?
with that.
12,
What- Just give me the number. What's the number, David?
Cindy, 12,
You can go 15.
15. Okay,
15.
Cindy's at 15. So it's
15,
15.
and then we got to, but that is
Thank
a
you.
project that's in the process, but I appreciate the funding.
Thank you.
$6 million budget, folks.
I know. So one project, this is from Eileen, one project that needs to work on is an update of the community map. For example, the community map does not show the foundation's memorial garden. Welcome material should be updated as a guide to celebration.
We're talking about the budget. Let's keep talking.
I
about
know,
the
but I'm reading a comment from Eileen. Thank you, Eileen. Okay,
Hey, Brian,
where
one
are we
thing I
at?
remember, I wrote a note on last time we met on the budget. You had some something that you wanted to do with depreciation or something you wanted to investigate or something?
Susanna had given me the depreciation number for
Okay.
Right.
22, and then I'll rough it out for 23 and
We don't
24.
have
I've
to
got
have-
that. I'm good.
I'm going back to the action item list that Susanna
Yes.
sent us, and
Can we go back to page 1 just so I can see that?
I believe on the 18 items that were there, none of them were necessary for an approval of the budget. Everything's been done or is working on. So
That's good.
I don't believe we're actually sitting on any unopened items that will keep us from approving a budget.
No, I think the only change was the storage.
Yeah, that was,
Can I go through this first page, Jackson, just so everybody's clear?
Yeah.
what they did?
yeah,
So
yeah.
service area assessments, that is the change that we just discussed going from 240 to 300. That's the math in 2022, and then the inflation adjustment in the other 2 years. Capital funding residents, we've already talked about it. Can we do it? The Tom question that Jackson's going to do. Island Village incremental. Remember last week where I said
Yeah.
one way I was going to get rid of the profit is we got to have some incremental expense. I
Yeah.
did 10, 45, 85, and those numbers are magic Brian Kinsel guesses.
Right.
Special events contingency of funding was something they wanted. We got the stuff from Dury, which went, I said, to the whole board. So
Yep.
fine there. The garden club funding, we just talked about it, and I did an inflation adjustment. You could argue if you want to keep it at 5, I don't care.
Yep.
Experience for new residents will go to the 15, I guess it is. So I'll have to adjust that. So that gets you to all the items that I thought were expense items. And then Jackson can tell me if I'm missing anything. And then you see the adjustments in yellow and what that means. By the way, the green item there, the 980.68, tied to last year's budget. I had 985.20. I got that number from somebody who's not around anymore, but it was my error. I should have actually just went back and proved to myself I had the right number. So I apologize for that. Now you've got the adjustments in dollars and you've got the adjustment in percentage based upon this budget, which will change for any decisions we make.
Yep.
So the new assessment would be 1,067.86 per homeowner, correct?
Yeah, and that'll obviously go up a little for the 15,000 versus the 7,500.
Right.
And then if we keep the capital funding residents up there is an important decision. That's real money.
But it may also adjust based on the service area piece may adjust based
Right.
on some of the other things that we talked about earlier.
I, you know,
Shove here, that's true.
yeah, I mean, I will just say that I am in favor of that budget and that particular amount of change for the HOA assessment. I think it's a reasonable number, given what we had to do, given the change in the scope of work and the changes that we anticipated. It is not an increase to pay for a new management company. It is literally just getting a broader scope of work and
It's a
really-
broader scope of work.
and,
I mean,
and,
that's-
and really bringing up to snuff how we fund things. And so from my standpoint, this is a perfectly reasonable number.
And don't forget inflation. Inflation is real.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, so you say, but
No,
This is that if it's getting cheaper.
to me, what we've done this year is at multiple places, it's a high level review. The scope of work is very different.
Yeah.
The whole look at service areas is very different. And a lot of our refinements in the budget as a whole, how we calculate things
it's a grown
and
up.
allocate things,
Yeah.
it's, to me, it's very appropriate. It hasn't been, well, there's been some in the weeds, but for the most part, it's been very appropriate, and I think it's moving us in a good
So
place.
what's
And it's,
the-
I support this.
What's the process? Will we vote on this at the next board meeting on the 22nd?
We actually vote on it at a board meeting once. Well, no, we have to send out the letters to everybody, which usually goes out in early October, and then the public can review it, and then we'll probably adopt this formally at like our 2nd October board meeting.
So do we need to give management a directive now to forward this set of numbers after you've made the revisions we discussed today?
I would think, yeah, I would think they make the revisions, Brian and Cindy review it one more time, let us know that it's done, and then it would go
And then
out.
you write the letter to residents that
real-
says,
The real item that we're waiting on is the legal answer on the capital funding residents.
Okay,
If we're gonna do that, we'll have to explain it to residents, and then the service area, at some point, we just gotta lock it and say there's the number.
okay, all right, I got it.
I actually, I would be interested, if it's all right with everybody, Eileen and Joseph were here last week and are here today. Do they have any comment on the budget? I mean, it's two residents who are involved in the community, so I'd love to hear if they think this is fair and reasonable, if they got any feedback. And they're both bashful, so they can speak.
I think the only thing that may come back to you is, again, going toward what Jackson was saying earlier, a definitive statement as to, is my money being used for certain things? So if you can come up with a clear explanation, and it sounded like you did after all the discussion, but that's probably the biggest thing in just terms of communicating information to the residents. Just make sure that's extremely clear that it is their money or it is not their money. And we've heard that with the service areas. We've heard that with the fields. We've heard that with capital improvements. I think if the board can be very consistent in terms of communicating whose money is being used for what, that would be good.
Eileen, do you want to give us feedback?
Yes, I agree with everything that Joseph said, as I usually do. Yeah, I think something was said the last time, that there has to be an emphasis that we are getting more. We aren't just, yes, there is an adjustment for inflation, but my understanding is that there will be more park monitors. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that I hear when I look at the forums and people talk to me, is that that's something that I think people, and not even just the park monitors, but a way to be able to coordinate a problem that they see to town hall in a timely manner and have it addressed. And it does sound like you've hit a lot of points. I personally think that the amount of money we pay is one of the great bargains of our time. We get a tremendous amount for it. And yeah, I would not have any problem with this budget. Thank you.
Okay, I found both of those feedbacks useful. So assuming Jackson gets us the legal answer, we true up on the one item and stuff like that, I'm hearing the board say they're comfortable with this budget. True statement?
True statement. Thank you.
Yes.
You have two other head nods, so they're,
Brian, you might want to just take, one of the things that I sent was, had the reclaimed water on, it's just a small little spreadsheet that shows where for CROA.
Yep.
Because like I said, when I made that adjustment for Parkview, it jiggled all the numbers. So you just might want to give them a quick look-see to make sure that it didn't really affect passive parks and stuff like that, the bigger ones.
Okay, that it wouldn't be material, but I'll take a look at it. That's easy.
I have a question. It's
Go
Eileen.
ahead.
When you're talking about the capital budget, you're not talking about when we pass the new owner's 1-year assessment. Is that correct? You were talking about something else?
We're not talking about that at all.
No.
Okay, thank you. I was a little confused.
Okay, are we done with the budget? That sounded very positive.
this has been tremendous work.
In less than a day of total meetings. Because
Oh,
remember, we used to
yeah,
have
yeah.
like all day budget meetings, but I think that also shows how much work was put in on the backside before we sat down to
But-
look
but
at
there's
this.
But we
So-
didn't get lunch.
But,
Or breakfast.
well, you don't know what's coming. You don't know what's in the next room.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't count on it.
Okay. I won't
It wasn't in the budget.
Yeah, I think we've had some very high level discussions, and I think it feels good to be where we are.
Very good. All right, anything else?
And yes, it's a good bargain. When you really step back and look, it's unbelievably low HOA rates, unbelievably low.
For the amount that the residents.
For the
get.
amount
Oh,
that you
yes.
get, it's like,
It's not, this is
You know,
not an outlandish.
when I told someone, it's like, oh, here's what we pay a year. They said, oh, you mean a month? And I said, no, this is what we pay over the year. It's like, wow.
Okay, any other questions, concerns, anything else we want to?
I've already sent the request to Tom Slayton.
Okay, very good.
so-
He should be here momentarily anyway.
We have a different Zoom for the next meeting though, right?
Yes, we
do.
do, because that
Yeah.
is executive session, so.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
and Cindy and Susanna.
And-
This
yes,
is
yeah.
extraordinary.
And Jim.
Little
All
bit.
the people who've been in.
Yeah.
Okay, very
Good
good.
job.
Do we have a motion?
I move to adjourn.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, very good. We can close out this. Thank you.